I didn't get a chance to watch your video yet. I've literally just been busy the whole last 24 hours. What was the high level of your conclusion, just so I know going in?
My conclusion is that I think that Setsuko deserved the punishment. I think that Riot messed up by not punishing other things harder, so that it creates a bunch of
Yep.
whataboutism. And I
Yep.
think that there's been precedent established, so it's not like out of the ordinary. Other people have been banned in the past for bad behavior, or breaking like tournament conduct. I also think that there's one more thing as well. Oh, I think that Riot needs to also, like, I think it's good that they punish, because ultimately it's important that Riot establishes like boundaries for the
Yeah.
toxicity that's happening. And yes, they may have been inconsistent in the past, but it's like better late than never type of situation.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Sounds like we're super aligned on it.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me, Bryce. What are your thoughts on everything here?
Oh, we're back. We're back. Okay. Okay. My thoughts on everything. At a 50,000 foot level, I think the reason why I felt inclined to talk about this is because I feel like overall the public sentiment on this is super warped, which that always happens to a certain extent. Whenever these types of controversies come up, right, there's always going to be a lot of people who are very angry about someone that they like watching getting banned, and I totally get where that's coming from, and there's a lot of emotionality behind these responses. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, I'm not sure that there is a credible. I've yet to see a credible defense of the behavior, if that makes sense, right? I've yet to see anyone say, well, what he did is not ban worthy when you really think about it, and here's why. Not even him, right? Like, he hasn't said that. No one has said that. Based on past precedent throughout esports, especially on the Riot side, my understanding of the behavior, I think that the punishment was on the lighter end and was kind of the beginning of establishing future precedent and drawing lines and making it clear about what type of behavior is and is not acceptable from people who are acting as the face of major game that's generating the type of revenue that this game is generating, and that is as popular as this type of game is. So if we start from that premise, then it's a little shocking how many people are really mad about it, right? That there is no substantive defense to this. I've seen a lot of somehow cheating specifically, which I'm not an expert in, so I'm not sure that I'm in a position to call out that punishment was fair. But I have no fucking idea whether or not that punishment was fair has anything to do with whether or not this punishment was fair. They are very, very different actions as it relates to, like, when you think about establishing precedent and punishments, right? There are actions related to the integrity of the game, which frankly I think should be more severe punishments on average. And so the fact that he wasn't punished, in my understanding of the set of facts, was that they did not conclude that it was that there was basically cheating going on, right? That the integrity of the outcome was jeopardized. And I saw some comments from Sherman about basically saying, hey, it's a really dangerous thing to set when we can't establish that, and then we punish as if it is. So that is obviously a major issue and something that needs to be thought about, but it should be completely divorced from the set of standards of conduct of, like, behaving like a reasonable human being and treating other humans with dignity and respect. And I don't know in what world we live in that is now controversial. So for me, I think I'm glad that Riot punished, and I'm glad, I really hope that this is a growing opportunity for Setsuko, and I hope that he learns lesson. And I hope, my big fear around this is that when these types of punishments happen, that people naturally get pushed to, like, people who are supporting him in the situation. If you're supporting him as a human being, great. Like, I reached out to him and said, like, I'm sure this is stressful. I'm here for you. I'd like to talk to you. Like, I'd love to, engage in a dialogue on this situation. That's different. Like, if you're saying, like, fuck Riot, they made the wrong decision, like, Setsuko shouldn't have been banned, this is horrible, blah, blah, blah. Like, you need to take a hard look in the mirror, because I'm just not sure that there's any reasonable basis for that position.
Okay, I mean, so you're talking purely about the comparison to the China win trade thing, accusations.
I'm addressing that so head on because it seems to be the primary response in terms of the people who are mad about it. That seems to be the core dialogue. It was it was in his tweet, his tweet response about it as well. So that seems to be the narrative that's picking up steam.
Okay. From what people are saying right now, Setsuko seems to show zero remorse. He's making everything about it as a joke. He clearly is not very sorry about it, even his public tweets about it. Uh, I guess, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that's completely incorrect, and that's the primary reason why I reached out to him. And everything that I'm saying right now, I'm going to say to him privately. I hope he's going to get on the phone with me. He's been streaming, but like what I'm going to tell him is that I think this is a crossroads moment for him in his career. And I have seen a lot of people get in these situations and like basically feel public pressure or have emotional reasons why they double or triple down on this type of behavior and this persona. And Setsuko started as like a very kind of fun-loving dynamic. It was less negative. He was like singing Disney songs. There's like a whole vibe to it. And I think that his energy has shifted as he's become a bigger streamer. And I understand why. I think that like he's found more traction and more popularity with what he was doing. And I'm not saying you can't lean into that. You can for sure lean into that as part of a streamer persona. But I think that understanding the core difference between right and wrong and making sure that you hold yourself accountable for that is an important thing that any human should be doing. And he's a literal kid, as are all, like, you know, most of the pro players, right? Like still very early on getting to define kind of who they are and what they want their lives to be and what they want to prioritize for. And this is a stop and wake the fuck up moment. This is okay, it's okay for me to be a little toxic. It's okay for me to, you know, push this as part of my personality. People like it. I enjoy it. That's great. I have no issues with any of that and should lean in. But at the point where it's crossing the line and like offending a whole group of people in a way that's just objectively wrong, then at that point you need to stop and take stock of what you're doing. And I think it's hard to show remorse immediately, but I'm hoping that he has other people in his life that are telling him this. But if I'm going to be the only person like go out of my way to tell him this, then I'm happy to do that. Like I think someone needs to say to him, like, it's okay to admit that you fucked up and genuinely apologize and reflect on what you are doing. That is part of being a human being.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's because I think you'd be a good person to do that. One, because you are a person who generally takes those kinds of responsibilities. You're kind of like the dad of the scene. I know I'm a dad now, but like I think it's a little bit different in terms of when it comes to sending the message. I think that is a big part of your role. I think you're also closer friends with him. You know, Setsuko and I are kind of colleagues. We never really kind of got it on. We've hung out and talked before, but I don't feel close enough to be able to extend that, right? But I think you've had enough private conversations both about TFT and not TFT, where I think you can kind of make that. And I hope it works out because it does sound like, and if I can just kind of be very honest about it, I think his current friend group is enabling him. I think that a lot of them are just like, yeah, right, it's a joke, like, and they're just making all about like, yeah, like CN, like, I mean, I see it, right? Like Soju is typing in the Discord servers and making it about the Chinese players and not about like his behavior at all. And what Soju typed in, and I understand why he says it. I just don't think he understands. I just don't agree with it. Is that Soju says that he's just saying things on his stream and in passing, right? As if like Setsuko isn't doing it on a big platform, as if he's not doing it during tournaments, right? Because I asked, would this be okay if Setsuko did this at Macau or Vegas? If he was like on stage and like between games, he's just grabbing the mic and he's just saying, I hate, like, you know, just flaming the Brazilian community. Like that would be completely not okay. And so like during the tournament premises, like this is not something that the way you should be conducting yourself. And that's the way Riot kind of engages in this tournament policy. And I think that a lot of people are missing the point because they're turning it into like the classic free speech on my own platform. It's not a big deal. Like you're just being too soft. And I think they're intentionally missing the point. I feel like a lot of people are they're just trying to stand up for their favorite streamer in this way.
All these types of concepts get conflated. It's so frustrating to me, like as a lawyer that spent time in thinking about this. Like, okay, free speech does not mean you get to say whatever you want in whatever context you want with no consequences. Okay, first of all, free speech is about what government can do to limit speech. Okay, Riot's not the government, so the notion of free speech does not apply in this context in any way, shape, or form. Right, as a private company that has a very valuable brand that it has to protect and a bunch of valuable IP underneath that brand that it has to protect. It has valuable games that make use of that IP that it has to protect. TFT was born as a side project, but it's not a side project anymore. It's one of the biggest video games in the world. It's generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, I have no doubt, and it's trending in a really positive direction. So the stakes here are very different, and that's part of the reason why I feel like it's such a crossroads moment for Setsuko. Because look, let's be honest about something, okay? So like Setsuko is one of the biggest streamers in the game. He's also one of the best players of the game. He is also, I think, from a raw horsepower perspective, anyone who's really paying attention thinks that he is the ceiling. Like, I think that Dish Soap is the better player, but I think that's because Dish Soap works quite a bit harder at his game. So Setsuko has a lot of opportunity before him. He can be a really big streamer if he wants to be. He can be a really big streamer and a really successful competitive player. He's got world championship potential. There is no doubt about that, especially if he starts applying himself in a more serious way to his improvement at the game. And he can define like a lot of things about where this all goes. And we've seen the track record. We know what happens when someone gets on the wrong side of Riot on one of their games and then doubles and triples down on it. It does not go well for them. There's a lot of things that the publisher of the game, especially Riot Games, because of their such tight control over their ecosystem more generally, that they get to do. They get to put things on and off the table for players based on how they behave. And there's no way that this would have like long-term consequences for Setsuko if he does the right thing, acknowledges his mistake, shows genuine contrition, learns from it, and grows. And I think that they would welcome him with open arms if he did that. I really believe that. But if he just keeps going down the path he's going, it's just going to get harder and harder for himself. And I like, if I was making my career out of a game that was made by Riot Games, I would really not want for a bunch of people at Riot Games to not like me, to think that I am a problem, like I'm going to be harming the brand, harming the game. And so it's a really big moment for him. It's also a big moment for the TFT community. Like, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because I feel like TFT community is special and different in a lot of ways, and it's a more inclusive community. It's been a more reasonable and less toxic community on average than all of the other major esport communities that I've been a part of. And so to be like really busy with my life right now and kind of disconnected, and then to see this was happening and plug in and read the takes on Reddit and on Twitter, and to see the dialogue, including from some people that I respect, I was just kind of blown away. I was like, how the fuck is this the response to what is going on? We need to change this. Like, the people who are on the right side of this issue need to be louder, and the people who are on the wrong side of this issue need to like stop opening their mouths and like fucking turn on their listening ears. Like I would tell my toddler, and like, let's figure this out together, because this is not a situation where there are reasonable takes on both sides. And if you're saying, oh, well, it's a reasonable take that like threats to integrity should be taken seriously, that's fine, but that has nothing to do with this. That's not a reasonable take on the Setsuko situation. That's a reasonable take on how Riot should be reacting to threats to competitive integrity in its events. And that's fine. I'm not disagreeing with you. That's a fucking red herring. That is a total distraction from what we're talking about right now.
I think that for a lot of people, they feel like it's just unjust. And so I asked people, like, what will make you feel better? Is it like, do you want to reduce the sentence on Setsuko, or do you want to just like ban the Chinese player? And it seems like most people, when you press them on that issue, they just want more punishment for the CN player, I think, more than
okay.
anything.
That's a totally valid POV, like I think but that has nothing to do with this.
But just to let you know, I think a lot of people, they're gonna keep saying like, oh, I don't want to excuse Setsuko's behavior, and then they kind of distract from it. Like, I know Kiyun's done that a lot, Pressman's done that a lot, Soji's done that, and they all have one thing in common, which is they're all friends with Setsuko, and they're trying to navigate the situation as best they can while being clearly biased. But I think that for them, they just don't want. Because what ends up happening as well, Bryce, is that there's also
I'm getting more dogged again.
people who are still doing that kind of stuff in the EU community. Like, even other Brazilian players are telling other people to kill themselves and do other like really toxic things. And so it feels like Setsuko just happened to be the guy made as an example of, and people don't like that. It felt to a lot of people, it felt like Riot was already had an agenda to like, if we can take like not that we can take out Setsuko, but like here's an excuse for us to actually take action against them because we just really don't like him personally.
I think that's extremely unlikely. I know a lot of these human beings personally. A lot of the people who are making the decision on the TFT esports team are people that I would consider friends, people that I go way back with in esports in a number of different contexts. And I just don't think there is any actual personal vendetta here. Is there potentially some argument that like making an example of Setsuko is a decision that they make because of his level of prominence? Yeah, but like that is part, heavy wears the crown, right? Like that's part of what happens when you're one of the faces of the game, is that you get less latitude, right? Because more people are paying attention to what you're doing and you have more influence on the community and how the game is perceived. And so, yeah, I mean, is it possible there are other people out there who are also deserving of bans for their behavior? For sure. I'm not watching anything close to every TFT streamer. And if someone finds other streamers that are saying this like as bad of stuff or worse stuff and wants to point it out, because as a community we decide this is below the standard of conduct that we're comfortable with and we think there should be ramifications for these actions, great, let's talk about punishing those people too. And is it fair to Setsuko that like theoretically there are people out there that have the same level of like negative behavior and they're not being punished? It's not fair, but like also resources are limited. They're not going to be aware of everyone. They're aware of Setsuko. They saw the clips. They decided it's below the standard of conduct and they punished for it. It's really hard for me to get upset about that when no one has credibly taken the position that what he did was in any way, shape, or form or okay, including him.
Yeah, and I think people just feel like he's being made an example of, but kind of what even T-Lies is saying in chat, you have to be held to a higher standard. It's not like it's you talk about heavy is the crown or heavy is the head that wears the crown. It's like the responsibility because let's say in a situation, if he gets like the same fine as other people, then Riot has basically said that it's not that big of a deal to act this way because the other guys have expressed that fines don't matter, which by the way is also kind of going back to what we were saying in the first place. Like Setsuko didn't just make fun of their nationality, he also made fun of their social status and their like for being poor and for other things like that. So the whole like once again like fine doesn't mean anything is an extremely privileged take, which is pretty bad. And so but you already know how they feel about that, so you're basically enabling them to do more. Riot would just be as guilty as the other people who are saying, yeah, it doesn't matter that you're dropping slurs and all that other stuff.
Yeah, their actions should have consequences.
All right. I mean, that's pretty much a good, I think that's a pretty good summary and wrapping point here. Sure. Is there anything that you feel like, some people feel like he got off light. I don't know if Setsuko got off that lightly, but I mean, I think it's fine because the way I view it is that they either can ban him for one event, or if they ban him for more than one event, that's effectively banning him for the rest of the set. I don't think he's going to make it to regionals if he gets banned for 2 cups, because he only has 1 cup, and I don't know if that means that he can qualify via snapshot. But if they do end up doing that, then they're effectively banned from the set. And the rest of the set is 2 months, which is not that long compared to like, if you remember Nikhil, Bryce, he got banned for like a year for leaving for the NBA All-Star game, which was a meme. And so like, he got banned for much longer, and I don't think people were necessarily calling for as much justice for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument that he got off on the lighter end for sure. I think if the same conduct happened from a League of Legends or Valorant player, anyone who thinks that it would be a 2-month ban has not paid close attention to how Riot has responded to this type of behavior within those communities. I think there's an element of this that's establishing precedent for TFT and wanting to maybe start off with a like punishment that I think anyone would look at and say is reasonable if they're like being honest with themselves about the set of facts here. So I think there's an element of that. And then I would like to believe there's an element of it that like factors in age, right? Like when you learn about the theory of punishment in law school, there's a million different factors that you end up considering in what's a just punishment, and age is one of them. There's a reason why you punish, not that Setsuko is a juvenile or anything, but there's a reason why you punish kids below 18 differently and people who are younger, even if they're being tried as an adult, differently. It's because like the way human brain forms, the opportunity to learn and grow from an experience is much different when you're younger. And so for me, like my fear around this is with the way the community is reacting, the way Setsuko's friends are reacting, and the way it's causing him to react, that he's not going to learn and grow from this. And in fact, it might cause a spiral that could go into a much more negative place. And that's really terrifying for me because I do consider Setsuko a friend. I've talked to him a decent amount over the years. We're not like close or anything, but I really, really like him. And I think he's a good human being. And I think that he's dealing with a lot. There is so much pressure on someone like that like goes from just being a kid who's probably been good at video games his whole life to now like very significantly in the spotlight. He's not as big as Soju, but he's very clearly the next biggest streamer. He has tons of viewership, on his channel, enormous amount of competitive success, a lot of eyeballs. That's a lot of pressure. And if he doesn't have the right support from people, around him, then it's really easy for this to go to a bad place. And that I don't want to see that happen. Like, I think Kevin's a good kid, a good person that can grow from this and can keep, largely doing what he's doing, but evolve and improve and not do this again. And, make amends with the Brazilian community and make amends with Riot and kind of have a reset. And I really, really, really hope that happens. I'd be so sad to see this go in the other direction.
It seems to be trending in the other direction.
It is, and that's literally the only reason why I messaged you, Dan, to have this conversation publicly is in the hopes of shifting that direction. That's why I want to talk about it. It's why I reached out to him.
You want to try to course correct here.
I want to course correct this, like as a community, like as a group of influencers. Streamers should be talking about this differently. Like the entire conversation around this needs to change. It is appalling to me the direction this is heading, and it is a big deal, and we do need to take it seriously. And it's completely counterproductive to spend all this time comparing it to unrelated infractions from unrelated people. Like, we have a person that we love, Setsuko, who has erred. He has engaged in behavior that we should not be okay with. We should be comfortable with that punishment. We should be acknowledging that while also admitting that saying that Setsuko is not a bad person. He's not evil. I don't think there was any, I really don't believe there was a lot of maliciousness behind this either.
I want to
we need to hold both truths in our head.
Bryce, about that. So you keep emphasizing that you believe in the good nature of Setsuko, and I think a lot of people are kind of raising their eyebrows at that because they feel like it's actually a reflection of his personality. Even if it's a stream persona, I feel like it's an extension of who he is. Like, even if it's not 100% of who he is, because I witnessed Setsuko be very nice and well-mannered and polite in person, but then, how much is that him? Some people can't reconcile these two statements.
Okay, so a couple things. One, I don't know, right? I have my instincts about this, and I'm an optimistic person, so I tend to see the best in people. So there's definitely some kind of innate personal bias there that could be influencing my perspective of this. What I will say is that, a lot of what's happening here is overlaying my career, right? The legal side of this, the broader esports side of this. I have a lot of perspective that I'm bringing from my decade plus from my job of working with a lot of different influencers in a lot of different contexts. And I have a lot of influencers that are friends. And what I can say is that who someone is on camera can be quite different than who they are off camera. It can be extremely misleading. For example, I think that the perception of Soju can often be very misleading if you're just looking at his stream persona. I think deep down, I think Soju is a huge softie who really loves his friends and wants to see everyone succeed. And he's I don't think in person he's remotely toxic, right? And I think Setsuko, by and large, I would think of him very similarly to that. I think he's a little bit more soft spoken, when you're actually he's one of those people that is quite shy inherently, but then a much louder stream personality, almost overcompensating. And I think that in my experience, there's really two types of streamers. There's those that build a full persona around them, and then there's those that are really just kind of playing up certain parts of their core personality for the stream entertainment value. My instinct from my observation of Setsuko is that he's more in the former category than the latter category. So the who I interact with when I have private conversations with Setsuko, when I see him at events, when him and I have conversations via Discord like that, very different than the Setsuko that streams. And for what it's worth, I really like Setsuko, and there was a period of my life where I watched a lot of Setsuko stream. I really do not enjoy his current stream persona, and I have not, by and large, watched Setsuko stream for a long time. So it's not that I don't see where people are coming from. I also don't enjoy the shift of his stream content, but he's found success with it, so I get it, and it doesn't change how I feel about Setsuko the human being.
Yeah, okay, that's fair of a stance to take. I think it's a very generous and optimistic stance, which you naturally are. Bryce has said this about many people who I think also have questionable actions and histories as well. Because Bryce tends to be really generous with his interpretation of things. But here's a couple of facts that are irrefutable. he also got into, this is not the first time he's had an offense. I think that's a really big thing, right?
Oh,
Back in
for
July,
sure.
he also had something like this. But even going back to a year ago, someone brought up in chat that there was an
Man,
incident
I'm getting more dogged again.
where he kind of goes off on a rioter, right? And then he had to like publicly apologize for being extremely rude and toxic to another rioter person. And then I was told just now, I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but I have to verify it. But apparently he went back and deleted that tweet because kind of like he got mad at Riot, and I'm not entirely sure what happened. So it feels like, at what point do we just stop saying like this is okay and he's like a good person, when all he's putting out there for everyone to see is negativity, a lot of offensive offensive things to say, and just quite frankly being like way too toxic for a lot of people to handle.
Well, so for me, that point is right now. That's why I'm here and why I'm so invested in this, because I have seen this trend, right? And there is behavior of his in the past that I would not defend, and that I think is not okay. Whether or not it was worthy of punishment, right? Like formal punishment from Riot, that doesn't get to whether or not it's okay. And so for me, I'm feeling like some of the pressures in his life, some of these dynamics around streaming, are maybe pushing him in a direction that's really problematic. And I think this needs to be the wake-up call. This needs to be him saying, you know what, this did cross the line. It's not okay. I need to go out and I need to say that. I need to say that publicly, and I need to say it privately. I need to make my fans know that I'm not interested in them defending me here, right? I need to clarify that while in like an emotional reaction to this situation, I engaged in some whataboutism and focused on this cheating stuff. At the end of the day, that's totally divorced from my own actions, and that I need to focus on myself and the fact that I fucked up, and I'm sorry to the people that I harmed for fucking up, and I'm sorry to the people that I made think that this behavior was okay, because it is not okay, and I will not engage in this behavior moving forward. And I am comfortable like having a streaming persona that can be somewhat toxic and can be trash talky or whatever. Like, that's part of his identity. That's totally great, totally fine. But he needs to know where the line is. He needs to stay on the right side of it. And that doesn't mean he's not allowed to make mistakes in the future. We all make mistakes, and none of us have a camera, a microphone on anywhere near the percentage of the time that Setsuko does. So I don't think it's reasonable for us to say like, well, he can't ever engage in anything that crosses the line. One thing I appreciate about the Riot situation is that he crossed the line and then he recognized it and he apologized for it. To my knowledge, he has not done anything like that again. So like that specific issue obviously had other issues. So I mean, look, I give humans latitude to evolve and grow and improve, probably more than most people, probably more than I should in some circumstances. But I'm inclined to continue to believe in the possibility that Setsuko can learn and grow from this, and that's my only goal in all of this.
Okay. I hope you succeed, because I wish I had your. I mean, I consider myself a pretty positive, optimistic person. I guess I'm really skeptical that he is, because that almost feel like he would. It almost feels like he would betray himself, because if he comes out even next week and says that, and says I reflected over the weekend, I wouldn't believe it personally. I personally believe that there are two sides of Setsuko, and that he can be really nice and thoughtful and kind. And I think he can also be really mean and nasty. And I think that habits is what ends up forming a lot of who you are. And I think he's just in a really big habit of choosing to feed the side of him that's rebellious and edgy and angry and toxic. And I think that I've accepted that as part of him, right? Part of the reason why I've accepted it is because I felt like it was out of bounds for me personally, but that just means that it's not for me. So like, just like you, I haven't watched much of his stream. I still talked about the game. I still keep track of his profile and stuff like that, but he doesn't even have his VOD, so I can't even like watch him anymore. So I've kind of disengaged from Setsuko. And that's fine, but I'm not going to like publicly go against him, be like, you guys shouldn't watch him, whatever. I even laugh at him. I interview him, so on and so forth. I talk with him. I hung out with him at EWC. I'm just saying that from my observation, that would sound crazy if he came out and said everything that you just did. Like if he said like, I'm sorry, that's not who I am, whatever. And like, because I would actually feel like he's just lying to me to just try to get the situation to blow over. So maybe. I think there needs
I'm not sure he's capable of PR brain like that, but maybe he is.
Well, I'm not sure if that's gonna happen, but Ro was telling people to get cancer. Was he saying that yet? Like just now? I mean, I know he's streaming right now, but that's. I mean, I think there is a new light being cast upon him, and I think that he is owning it right now. So
And I'm willing to acknowledge the possibility that I'm just wrong about this, right? Like I can hope for the best and still account for the possibility that I'm wrong, and that like deep down there is like, you know, too much toxicity in kind of his inner voice, and that the, you know, his nature is problematic in some way. It's possible.
Yeah. Look, and again, I think you're coming in at, you're probably the last line of defense, honestly.
Yeah, kind of.
You're probably the last line of defense.
Yeah.
And if he's
Okay,
not going to come
got
back from this, like let's say he just ends up doing this. I personally, so my prediction when I turned on stream today is I said this is not the last time Setsuko is gonna get into trouble, and I don't think it's gonna be sooner rather than later. I think he's gonna run into another issue very soon, and probably as soon as set 13. Like when he gets back, I think he is gonna try to be himself, right? And I think that we're gonna run into this issue again in a few months. Personally, that's my prediction. But maybe I'm too realistic. Maybe I'm too pessimistic about it.
You definitely could be right, and I hope that you're wrong.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah. Thanks for calling me. Bryce had to Uber back
Yeah.
from doing an esports lecture at a university, right?
Yeah, I'm Ubering to the airport to fly back from New York. So
Cancel dinner with me for this,
time.
you guys. We were supposed to have dinner, and he was just
yeah,
like,
we gotta do that.
Yeah.
We gotta do that like next week or the week after. Are you going to TwitchCon?
No, I
Okay.
have something even more hype. Tactician's Cup #2, Pog.
Oh yeah, Pog.
Yeah.
Okay, well, 'twas fun. I'll let you get back to stream. Hopefully, I wasn't looking at chat, so hopefully it wasn't too negative to my POV. We'll see.
Yeah. Also, yeah, your Uber driver's a champ for listening to you. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Agreed. All right, bye everybody. Miss you all.
All right, later, Bryce. That was an impromptu call with Bryce. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Bryce really wanted to talk about it, so that's partially why all of a sudden he called me. He's like, listen, we got to talk about this somehow. And I'm like, okay, sure, but like when? And I'm like, honestly, man, just call me whenever you're free. So he called me like literally just now. Do you think anyone close to him is DMing him? Bryce probably will be the only person who does, because I don't think a lot of the, and I say this in the least hostile way or least aggressive way possible. I don't think other TFT players are capable of having a strong intervention in a strong intervention conversation in an emotionally mature way. I think a lot of them end up kind of resorting to man, how do I want to phrase this? I just think that they don't want to think about these things too deeply, and they want to go off the vibes. They just want to like relax and just like, okay, whatever, like fuck TFT, fuck this game, fuck Riot, and let's just go do our own thing. They just rather punt than actually sit down and hammer things through. And I think that it's not because they don't see what the problem is. I just don't think that they feel like it's their problem to solve, nor do they have the solution, or if they even believe in themselves. The only person that's ever tried to sit down and try to stop Setsuko, as far as I know, is Milk. And even then, I think Milk gave up after like one attempt. So I don't think like his friends defend him. I don't think his friends agree with him. I don't think his friends like think like, you know, what he did was okay. I think it's more like they don't feel qualified or capable of having that. But I don't mean that in like a condescending way, if that makes sense. I'm trying to express, because like a lot of these guys, they met and bonded over a hobby, right? TFT was a hobby, of fun passion for them to do things. And it wasn't like it's not like an emotional journey. They didn't meet at church, you know, where you're trying to always introspectively look at yourself, or whatever type of like they're not trying to bond as humans. They're just trying to game. And so through a hobby, it's kind of hard for you guys to have this conversation unless you're like really close. Zane says it's scary to talk to your friend about your behavior being bad, and they don't want to do scary thing. Yeah, it's not just scary, but also I think like again they're not experienced in it. I don't think they feel qualified to do it. And yeah, they end up resorting to meme speak. That's what you guys are saying. Streaming pays the bills and he gets more viewers and attention the more toxic he is. So what's his incentive to stop? I mean, there's not much of an incentive. In fact, that'd be one of the more interesting. That's why I think that's why Bryce wanted to step in and have that conversation, because right now it almost makes too much sense for him to use this as a way to catapult himself up and grow his presence, right? Because now he's going to attract a different type of audience that wants him to do more of that kind of stuff, right? Like, even if his game, maybe he's like Fivehead and he's like, I want to be such a bigger streamer that like one day I can have my redemption arc and kind of toggle that good side person inside of me. Like, but either way, he's on a path right now that, like, I don't think he's going to do that. I don't know I think he's just trying to be himself and just go with like the flow. But I kind of lost my train. Oh, what's his instead of stop? Nothing. There's nothing to stop him other than the fact that some people maybe he doesn't want to disappoint people. Maybe he doesn't like getting yelled at. Maybe he doesn't like toxicity. Dr. Dude, okay. I'm here talking as if I know everything. I don't know Setsuko at all, which is why I don't feel like I can talk to him. Like, I don't, if he came to me to talk to me about stuff, I would talk to him. He's actually done that before. He's actually come to me before to ask about how to apologize. That's actually happened before. And when I gave him advice, he said, that doesn't sound like me. I'm just going to go with like this statement. And it was kind of like a meme-ish, tongue-in-cheek statement. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, do whatever you feel like is good. So I didn't actually feel like I got to him. And I think that was kind of a moment where I felt like I couldn't really have much conversation with him because it felt very like, I don't think he feels very comfortable in those situations himself. So I'm not asking for him to have these conversations either. I personally am just observing him now. Like, I would still talk to him about TFT. I would still interview him. I'll still VOD review him. I still power rank him. I don't know if I would be the person to intervene, because I don't think that's my role, unfortunately. Like, in our relationship, I think our relationship is purely about work. But I think some people like Bryce feel very convicted about it, and I'm very proud of him for doing so. Now, if it was with Soju or Milk, who I'm much closer to, those are some of my closest friends in the scene, I would probably do that. I mean, I definitely would do that. But I personally don't know if Setsuko and I are that close enough to do it. He wants to be TFT Tyler 1. Well, unfortunately, he's being more like TFT TF Blade than Tyler 1 right now. Like, there's a difference between the way, like the closest thing to Tyler 1 is actually Soju. He's right now being much closer to some of the other toxic people in League that didn't exactly curve out like Tyler 1. But we'll see. He can get permaban. Like, okay, the thing is, it's not like I don't want him to be part of the scene. I think if Setsuko retires, we lose a lot from competitive TFT for North America. But there is a limit of how much I'm willing to be like, well, he's really good at the game, right? That should be the same case with a lot of things. That's a big problem with sports. There's a lot of good people, good athletes who do horrendous, horrific, completely unethical things and get away with domestic abuse and other different things that are just completely uncalled for because they're really good at putting a ball through a hoop or kicking or something like that. Like, there was a Dutch Olympic player. I'm sorry if I'm calling the wrong nationality, but there was like an Olympic volleyball player who I think literally got convicted of sexual misconduct with an underage person. I think this is what happened. And he just played on the Olympic team anyways, because they just like said that was their best chance to win. And like, that's not okay. So obviously I'm not trying to compare him to that. I'm just saying I do have those limits. And I don't think Setsuko has crossed that threshold with me yet, but I can see that I can see that he's on the path to the point where I would draw that line. But I hope that Bryce gets to him. I hope that course corrects. Anyways, this is me like talking as if, like, again, I'm not trying to be like the person that stands in my ivory tower like I'm perfect and I navigate all these high pressure critical situations flawlessly. But I do know one thing, which is like what he did was not okay. I don't think fire with fire or the ends justify the means type of thing, or whatever else you want to say, like just because he was harassed by the Brazilian community. I do think people in the Brazilian community also who were really toxic to him should also suffer punishment, assuming that was happening, right? Like I don't actually see the messages, but they're sending a ton of bad messages to him. I think Riot should crack down the win trade thing so they can stop getting grief about that. And I mean, I think they are. So there's nothing really much to say about the situation that we haven't already said. I think Macau might end up being pretty pivotal because from my limited view, I agree with Bryce. At least there's a disparity in personality and person. I don't think the TFT players talk a little bit more about the real stuff. It's awkward dynamic where there's a 6-month gap between a serious emotional development of friendships because they only happen in IRL events. I mean, yes. there's some of that. Setsuko and all them meet up actually pretty often. They actually, you know, these guys actually meet up like once every 2 months, once every month. That's pretty frequent. I would say that the big problem is that what Raptor said. There's just no incentive to stop. Oh, viewer games. Do you guys want to do the viewer games? The PB viewer games? Today's ladder games were so unsatisfying. I feel like there's some unfinished business.